I need help getting this thing on. Maybe not. Can you hear me okay? Everybody's fine in the back row? Did Bob speak? I think that's fine. Good afternoon. I'm Jacques Cousteau. Many of you associate me with underwater exploration, popularizing the ocean, sea life, and environmental concerns with television documentaries back in the day.
Excuse me, Rick, I forgot one thing.
No problem.
In 2 weeks, our speaker is going to tell us how you program vacuum cleaners. It would be very interesting. He was involved in the design and development of robotic vacuum cleaners. So be sure to come here.
And cell phones too. And please turn off your cell phones. Thank you.
I know we did that.
Oh, got it. Thank you. So, in my lifetime, I was a husband, a father, a deep sea diver, was captain of a ship. I was a TV producer, a TV show host, inventor, author, innovator, leader, soldier, resistance fighter, war hero, leader, and I did this all in my own lifetime here. Over many years, I brought the underwater world into your living room and inspired and educated millions of people worldwide. So let's start right now and I'll talk about my life. I was born June 11, 1910 in Saint Andre de Cubzac, a small town in southwest France. And this is what the town looked like back at the turn of the century. My parents, my father Daniel was an international lawyer. My mom, Elizabeth, was an heiress to a local wine merchant and landowner. I had an older brother named Pierre Antoine, who was 4 years older than me. This is when I was a baby. However, as a young child, I was rather sickly and suffered from anemia and stomach problems. However, I did learn to swim at age 4, and swimming would become my lifelong passion. At age 10, I lived in the New York area for 2 years with my family, picked up some English, and went to summer camps in Connecticut where I learned to swim even better. Back in France, I became interested in mechanical things, purchased a movie camera, took it apart to see how it worked, and then shot films around my home and my neighborhood. I didn't do too well in school as I was rather bored and misbehaved. At age 13, I broke a window, was briefly expelled from school, and my parents then sent me to a boarding school in Alsace, France, and then I went to college at Stanislas College in Paris. However, in 1930, when I was 20 years old, I entered the École Navale, or the French Navy. And I was stationed in Brest, France, just to the west of France, right here. And if I want to interrupt, can you guys see okay here? Everything's fine, thank you. In Brest, France, here. And this is what it looks like. And I was trained as a gunnery officer there for 3 years. This is what the port looked like back then, a major seaport. This is what it looks like nowadays. Here are some of my teammates. And I graduated from there as a second lieutenant. And these are some of the mates that I had. And then I joined the Navy's information services, and the Navy took me to a lot of different ports around the world, and I brought my camera as a hobby to film what I saw. I was in French Polynesia, at Tahiti, with my camera, and filmed these locations. However, tragedy struck in the mid-1930s when I was in my mid-20s. I was going to a wedding late at night. The lights on my car shorted out, and I got into a serious car wreck. And that as I broke both my arms, I broke a dozen broken bones in my body. My right side was temporarily paralyzed. So I was told then to swim to recover. This abruptly ended my ideas about becoming a naval aviator. So I was and swimming in the Mediterranean to recover. And in 1936, I was on the ship Condorcet, and a friend of mine, Philippe Delis, gave me a pair of underwater goggles. And when I got these, this opened up my eyes to a brand new world that I fell in love with. From 1936 to 39, I was with the information services, and the Navy sent me to Shanghai, China, Japan, and USSR to gather intelligence. And in the middle of all this, in 1937, when I was 27 years old, and I met Simone Melchior, and she was 17, and we got married, and we would have 2 boys, Jean-Michel, born in 38, and 1940, Philippe. And when war broke out in Europe, it was a gunnery officer with the French Navy, but the Nazis overran France in 1940. So I joined the resistance movement with these men here, and we would spy on and document the troops Italian troops in France. I did this for a number of years, and after the war, by the way, I was awarded the French Cross for my bravery. So, I had the time then, during the war, to take on underwater exploration. And in 1943, I met Emile Gagnon here, who was a French engineer, and we both shared a passion for diving. You see, compressed air cylinders were invented then, and we experimented with snorkel hoses, body suits, and breathing apparatuses for deep diving. In time, we developed the aqua lung, or a scuba tank, allowing divers to stay underwater for longer periods of time. It was a twin hose breathing apparatus here. Actually, Simone's father financed Emile to build the aqua lung. Actually, we improved on an existing device, but modified it with a regulator for longer durations underwater. Scuba, or self-contained breathing apparatus, was invented in 1926, but airflow to the diver from air tanks was poorly regulated, which means you couldn't stay underwater very long. So, Emile and I invented and patented the demand regulator, allowing air on demand, not continuously. Then the air can last longer. So we were the inventors of this certain way to breathe with this. This could come in 1, 2, or 3 tanks, as you choose. This then, it'll look like this, twin hose. This then eliminated those antiquated and cumbersome heavy helmets that they used to underwater. I call them diver Dan suits. You would have a small area to look out, you'd have weighted boots in the old days, and you'd have to have weighted boots to keep you down, and have a hose connected to a ship above, and you'd trudge along on the bottom, but sand would be everywhere, and you couldn't see very much. So we got rid of that and allowed us more freedom to dive and stay underwater. Now, I learned the hard way that breathing pure oxygen underwater below 45 feet wouldn't make me stay underwater longer, and was actually toxic. And that's because of the air pressure exerted, the water pressure exerted when you're underwater. Right now, we're at 15 psi, but when you dive 34 feet down, it becomes 2 atmospheres or 30 psi. You dive down 34 feet deeper to 68 feet, and it becomes 45 psi, and then when you dive to about 100 feet, it becomes 4 atmospheres or 60 psi. And this goes all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, no matter how deep the ocean is. I also developed a waterproof camera that can withstand the high pressure of deep water. And in 1942-43, I tested out my first prototype aqua lung. And I got involved with underwater filmmaking, and with my friend Marcel Isaac, we made the first French underwater documentary film called 18 Meters Deep, or 18 Meters de Fond. Here I am with my camera, ready to go underwater, and here. Actually, it was a short film. It was only a 20-minute film, but in order to film this, we went to the Embiid Islands in South France, not too far from Marseille, where I would live with Simone. And we explored the coral reefs there with our camera that we had. And the waters are warm there and support this kind of life and environment. And it was a 20-minute short film, and we received an art prize for this film. Later, we filmed another documentary called Shipwrecks, or EPOBs, and we explored the British wreck Dalton, using these flares to go underneath. And you notice that Philippe Talise mentioned is here. He helped me out with this film. And both films that I made, the Shipwrecks and the 18 Meters Deep, received critical acclaim, and my name was becoming known. And so, with the Aqualung, we're able to evolve from those old antiquated suits to what we have now, which would give us freedom to move about in the ocean and explore what we want to explore. After the war, I would help remove mines in French waters left over from the war in 1947. While doing research for the French Navy, I set a new depth record for a freediver at 300 feet or 100 yards. And in '48, with Talise, who's shown here, who was a very brave man and came with me on my early expeditions, we undertook the first underwater archaeology expedition in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Tunisia to find an ancient Roman wreck called Medea. And this is just in the waters just north of Tunisia. It wasn't really that deep. But what this was, about 2,200 years ago, the Romans had a barge ship that sank in this area, and we found some statues like this, and it was carrying mainly a lot of cargo. Now the Romans at that time, around the time of Christ, controlled all of North Africa, Turkey, Greece, Italy, France, Spain, the Balkans, and controlled the whole Mediterranean. So this was their area, but this ship sunk. And I also got some amphoras, is what they're called. They're vessels that held wine, water, and olive oil. Here I'm looking at a cup. Now this would open up a whole branch of underwater archaeology that's still going on today. We've all heard about shipwrecks that are discovered, maybe with gold coins or silver bars in them. This just made the news. Explorer Shackleton's ship Endurance found after a century. This made the news just 5 days ago. They found Ernest Shackleton's ship in the Weddell Sea off Antarctica, who wanted to explore Antarctica. It was 100 years old that they found. So it still pertains today and is still relevant. I got my famous ship Calypso from Thomas Guinness of the Brewery Company. This ship was a minesweeper during the war and became a ferry after it. Actually, Guinness let me have it for, let me lease it for £1 a year because he was so excited about my undersea adventures that I told him about. And I made it in my own research vessel. Actually, my wife, Simone, sold some of her family's jewels and to buy fuel for the Calypso, and sold her fur to buy a compass and gyroscope. It became my home and principal vessel for 4 decades of diving and filming. And I want to go back to this slide. We carried about 12 or 20 men between that, and it would have a lot of sections to it, so we could store materials and places for the men to sleep, and for storage units there. She was 139 feet long and weighed 380 tons, and I got her for a song, and she looked like this. Many of you remember the Calypso, I'm sure. And it looked like this. Different aspects to it. We'll get into these aspects as we're going along. And like this. In 1953, at age 43, I wrote my first book called Silent World, which was about our oceans, and this was a big hit in that it was published in 22 languages and sold 5 million copies. This book helped finance my undersea explorations, and in this book I predicted the use of echolocation by dolphins. That is, how do they know where they're going at night? How are they able to get through the Strait of Gibraltar from the North Atlantic and into the Mediterranean Sea, this small, narrow strait, even at night when they couldn't see where they were going. Well, they used sonar to do that. This book then was able to finance everything, and my book turned into a color documentary movie in 1956 and made a Technicolor called The Silent World. And you can see which this was a 90-minute film from the book, and we show people up going in shark cages, using scooters, using flares to go underwater, looking at coral reefs and very large fish. You'll notice it was directed by Louis Malle, who became a French film director in the 70s and 80s, a famous one, and Albert Falco that we'll talk about. So this movie was so good that it won an Oscar in 1957 for Best Documentary, and it won a Plume d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival for Best Documentary. So in other words, Silent World was a book and a movie, and it won awards for it. And it's all because of really of the aqualung that was able to stay underwater longer. And in 1957, with the help of Jean Millard, I became an advisor for a single pilot diving saucer that could reach 350 meters or more than 1,100 feet underwater, where the PSI is a couple hundred PSI. And in 1958, I resigned from the Navy and became director of the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco. But I was using the bathyscaphe here, developed by August, and I'm trying to get his first name, developed by August and Jacques Picard in the early 50s. They made this vessel that was able to dive very deep. And although I didn't go on it, in 1960, this bathyscaphe was able to go into the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the world, where the ocean goes to 35,000 feet. They were able to go to 30,000 feet with it and to explore that area. And yes, there's life there also at that level and that pressure. And Mariana Trench is so deep that if you took the Mount Everest and flipped it upside down and put it in the trench, you still have a mile left over. It's that deep. It's in the North Pacific near Guam. So I was involved partially with that because a lot of things actually were going on in the 1960s. It was a time for a lot of scientific development, and anything was possible in the 60s. And after that, we knew a diver named Bob. Bob collected sponges, and they got stuck to his pants and became known as Sponge Pants Bob. Anyways. And by the way, I was able to learn English in the French Navy, hanging around some English-speaking men. It would make it easier for me to get involved with the American media outlets like TV, radio, and magazine, and interviews later on. With media coverage, I was able to get my eco-friendly message out to the public. And by that means, I was able to get in magazines like the Eagle magazine here at Boy Scout to read this about diving with sharks. Or undersea exploration, hear how they put pipelines underneath the water and how we film underwater, and even a French magazine. In 1959, I addressed the first Oceanic Congress, which received much publicity. And on this side of this thing, there's a problem here, because in 1960, the European Atomic Energy Agency wanted to test dump radioactive materials off the coast of France to get rid of it. I strenuously objected and organized a publicity campaign letting French citizens in affected areas know of this radioactive plant. Planned organizations, protests were made, and it was called off. This is the first environmental protest movement made. How would you feel if radioactive material were dumped off the Space Coast here in Florida, 60 miles to the east of us? You'd feel outraged, just like anybody would, and the French citizens did too. So we had to stop the dumping of chemicals and waste into our oceans. And in 1960, when I was 50 years old, I produced a short film called Golden Fish. Didn't have any dialogue in it. It was about a boy, a cat, and a goldfish, and it won an Oscar for Best Short Film in that same year. And in that year, in March of 1960, Time magazine put me on the cover, and I was quoted as saying, in the future, men could surgically be implanted with gills to make them breathe underwater. But for some reason, I don't think that worked out. Okay, here I am in April of '61 with President Kennedy, and he personally presented the National Geographic's gold medal to me at the White House. Here's Simone, here I am, here's Kennedy, and here's a better picture of it right here. And then in the early '60s, I started establishing manned bases on the seafloor. Throughout the 1960s, our team constructed 3 consecutive continental shelf stations called Conshelf 1, 2, and 3. This was Conshelf 1. It was funded by French petrochemical companies, and they were to be undersea habitats as bases for future mining and drilling operations. Conshelf 1 was constructed in '62, and it was 33 feet long and 16 feet long, and it was in water submerged by Marseille, France. So they spent a week here in this kind of cylinder here. Here I am talking to Albert Falco inside this, and they were able to stay there a week. If you're wondering how they got air, that was pumped in from a ship above, as well as power. They were able to watch TV, sleep, read, and eat there, and had food already there. So it was submerged in waters there off Marseille. And Albert Falco would come with me on many occasions with me. He would become captain of the ship for some time also. He was a brave, loyal man, the kind I like. Conshelf 2 was located in the Sudanese Sea at 100 feet and was significantly bigger than Conshelf 1. It was a watertight steel cylinder with a starfish-shaped habitat. 5 oceanauts lived in it for 30 days. And even Simone lived in it for a couple days, and she became the first woman aquanaut in this starfish house, or Conshelf 2. So it looked like a starfish. It was located 100 feet here, and this is what it looked like inside. But more specifically, it looked like this. A place you can go in and out of, underwater, and a research station, a galley, a table and chairs, a communications device where we can talk to the people above that was supplied with power, and place to sleep, and bathroom facilities here. This is living full-time underwater. And this is what Conshelf looked like. And surface support provided the habitat with air and power, and they breathed helium mixed with oxygen to avoid nitrogen narcosis at that depth. You can't have pure oxygen. Please note that there were psychological effects living this way, with cramped quarters and privacy issues. But I brought to the attention of the public scuba diving and environmental awareness. So I made another film about these habitats. I made a film about them called World Without Sun. And it was to depict what it was like living underwater in that time. And here we are, sitting at a table underwater in the habitat, and then diving later on. And this also won Best Documentary and got an Oscar for it back in '64 for this. The third and final mission was Conshelf 3, which is a habitat submerged in water off Nice, France, about 100 yards down. It had 6 aquanauts in it, and it was onion-shaped. Here we are about to go into it. And it looked like this. This is Conshelf 2 was star-shaped. Conshelf 3, the one we're talking about now, was onion-shaped and looked like this on the inside off the waters of Nice, France. That's because the waters are warmer there. And myself and my son Philippe and a few other aquanauts stayed down there for 30 days performing industrial tasks. Although the 3 missions were successful, we later moved on to other ventures. These experiments proved humans were able to live and work underwater. Later, undersea robots would become the method of choice for underwater work. And this was our, here we are, this was our plan for the future. Our vision of it was to have these habitats so men could easily go out underwater and do their work like mining and drilling later on. And like a starfish-shaped one, a walkway between, an area, larger area, an onion-shaped one. This would be able to go up to a ship above to be attached. I'm assuming the power would be from a ship above. This is what Cousteau Fund looks like now. It's been since abandoned. But there is still one operating underwater research station left, and it's called Aquarius Reef Base. It's in the Florida Keys, and people do live down there and stay down there. So it's a research center that they have. So the dream still is alive about living underwater. And along the way, my team and I developed the first submersible scooters, or diving saucer. It's a mini submarine I call Denise. I vaguely mentioned her before when I had the idea for it. And Denise would be very heavy. It had to be carried up by a crane and look like this. But on the inside, two men were able to lay down in it, look out, do exploration underwater. It'd have a propulsion system, a light system, and an air filtration system for us to breathe. So this was Denise. Here I am supervising it coming on the Calypso. It was pretty heavy. And I also worked on, a little bit later on, high-tech wind sails called turbo sails, reducing oceanic fuel consumption, and looked like this. They were operated by diesel, and they had a hard time though getting under bridges. That was the problem with them. So, 1966, I got my first hour-long TV special called The World of Jacques Cousteau, and received critical acclaim. Then I got a lucrative contract with ABC in 1968 when I was age 58 with a series called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. The program ran for 8 seasons until 1976 and starred myself, my 2 sons, Jean-Michel, Philippe, and our crew. So here I am talking with my 2 boys when they were younger. And of course they would be involved in this production, in this TV series with me. And here I am giving orders. In the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. Maybe some of you saw this. You remember them. Millions of viewers saw this. I narrated the program and became a television producer, deciding what footage and length of film segments to be shown. Many of you remember my programs. Millions of viewers were inspired by a world they had never seen. My upbeat yet concerned environmental emphasis on these shows later spawned groups. So, in addition to showing people what the undersea world looked like, I had a message to give to people. And that message was able to translate into practical things like Greenpeace and Earth Day and local and national environmental programs. Many of you have gone to Earth Day celebrations and when you're back in your hometown, for instance. These used to be called civic involvement days. We shut down the Champs-Élysées and put in a big whale to show how concerned France is, because France is surrounded by 3 sides of water. So I was able to be instrumental in inspiring people to do this. Now, the new TV show that started in '68, I produced, edited, starred in, and was a voiceover for dozens of documentaries that maybe some of you saw. And I had a low-key way of delivering my message, and I'm being a narrator. I wasn't an actor. I had no idea about how to act. I just was a guy that was concerned, so I came across as low-key and mild-mannered about what I wanted to say. Nothing dramatic. And both my sons contributed and were involved in our productions. The list of televised programs is quite extensive, but some of the shows my team and I developed were about sharks, coral reefs, whales, old sunken ships, squids, lobsters, salmon, octopus, penguins, undersea caves, dolphins, and walruses. For instance, in these shows we would talk about diving for sunken treasure. The octopus and the squid we would talk about. Pacific explorations, and the marine iguanas on Galapagos Islands, sharks and whales here, manatees, and the Laguna launch ships really captivated me because you've heard of the Battle of Midway back in World War II. In that battle between Japanese and American forces, 5 aircraft carriers were sunk in this area here, and 400 planes were shot down on both sides. So it's really a graveyard that you can visit, and this is really the way to understand about history. That is, if you wanted history, you can see it underwater this way. What happened to these unique situations. Other subjects were far-off places like the Yucatan, Antarctica, Lake Titicaca, Corsica. Of course, all these shows had titles to them, but all dealt with different places, situations, and unique species. I was first to feature many never-before-seen sea creatures and remote places to the public on primetime TV. Since our show received good ratings, we became popular in the public eye. I opened up a whole new world of globe-trotting adventure, exotic places, and mysterious natural wonders. Most of my shows carried this environmental message, with an element of risk and suspense thrown in, because scuba diving in uncharted waters can be dangerous. Therefore, anything can happen at sea, and everything had to work right. Our equipment had to, and we had to have loyal, dedicated team members to make it work. Kind of like a football team, everybody does his part, or her part, to make things work out. And plus extensive planning was needed of what and where to film. And my boat constantly became a floating house, really floating in new ports. There was always endless navigation charts to study, and the upkeep of the Calypso concerning food provisions, supplies, medical situations for the crew, weather conditions, fuel, radio communications, daily upkeep and cleaning, ship morale, and crew issues, and even cameras, wetsuits, fins, and recharge tanks. Here I am talking to one of my divers about this, checking out the charts, going in the water. And here we are on the Calypso. We would plan out what we wanted to do for the day, and my wife Simone would be in the background, which she liked to be. And we're about ready to dive with our aqua lungs, and we are getting the Denise ready. So this is what life was like on board. And Simone would come with me, and she was known as the shepherdess, or she would take care of our crew. She was very motherly about things and very maternal, and she was a great team member to have with me. Here we are together. And we had on board the Calypso, we had a helicopter and a helicopter pad to put it on, because we needed to fly in to the mainland to deliver film footage or get urgent supplies, or for whatever situation came up. And we also had a crane on it to not only take the Denise on and off, but to get provisions on. Since we had about 15 to 20 men on the ship, they needed a lot of food. So tons of it literally would be put on the ship. We had to get water, our own supplies. Whenever we go into port, we had to fill up, get fuel, and provisions for our next round of what we were doing. And we were always on the go. In a helicopter, getting ready for sound checks and filming with Denise. You're wondering about the outfit? The blue is for obviously the ocean. The red hat is a symbol for the French fishermen that supplied France with so much fish for centuries and for even thousands of years along the way. So it's an homage to them. When and where to shoot was important. Many hours were given to editing our final product. This required us to show things properly and in logical sequence on film for the public to understand. We had a special room on the Calypso to edit what we shot. And here I am editing what we shot with the reels of film here. Here I am with the sound check on this. We had to edit what we did. Literally miles of film were shot each year, which we had to condense to the right length, about 50 minutes for one regular primetime TV show with timed inter-sync narration. More than 80% of what we filmed was never used and left on the cutting room floor. However, all this work is called producing a film. Now, lighting, editing is one thing, lighting is another, because the first 200 feet of the ocean is sunlight zone where you can easily get sunlight. But then from about 200 to about 800 feet is the twilight zone where you can't see much, and below that's the midnight zone where nothing can see. So you have to bring your own lights, and especially in underwater cave diving. And we had to have these kind of lights here. Some of what we filmed was too dark or in murky waters, or our lights were not positioned right, or the creatures we wanted to find, they escaped from our cameras, like the sea eel here. There could be camera and equipment problems or hazardous conditions like tropical storms or typhoons at sea that stirred things up. And safety was a big concern. We had to have a line to go up to know where the ship was, underwater lights, and even on our boat here. And this is Aquarius Reef. This is nowadays current day. They're showing off what they can do underwater with new suits, and this is the kind of technology that's developed nowadays. And safety is a big concern in that we wore special waterproof watches underwater that told us how much air was left to breathe, called aqua timers. And we used a special erasable board underwater to write on, and we had to use hand signals because underwater you can't see very well, you don't have peripheral vision, you can't hear, you can't talk, you can't smell, so you have to use hand signals like, okay, stop, maybe repeat, I'm not sure about this, and other special signals like this, or thumbs down, not good, these kind. Now, if you put all these hand signals together and you do a dance, you'd be able to get disco, and that's how we invented disco. Actually, I work tirelessly each day to give you a product and show in the world that I've been in love with for much of my life. Really, for decades, I publicly wore my passions right on my sleeve. And I got support from everybody, like my family, the French citizens, TV executives. I got voluminous fan mail. I had bags of it every week that would be flown into the Calypso. And we would film in unique places, like here in Antarctica, and even dive in the Arctic Ocean just underneath the ice there. We also had Calypso carried advanced equipment, including 1- and 2-man mini submarines that I developed, diving saucers and underwater scooters. The ship had an observation window about 10 feet below where you can peer out what's going on. And we had, she carried quite a lot of scuba supplies, plus cameras, cords, and lights that we needed to film underwater. Everything was backed up. One thing conked out, we'd have to use another thing. So we had to be ready and prepared. And here we all, really, in a sense, we all do live in a yellow submarine, don't we? In 1975, the singer John Denver made a song, hit #2 on the charts, called Calypso. Here I am with John, and here he is diving with me. Even a toy model maker got involved in this, made a toy model kit for people to put together of the Calypso. So the Calypso was a very dear family member to me, like my daughter, and go everywhere I would go. Now, actually, the ABC series stopped in '76, so I immediately jumped to PBS and made a series called the Cousteau Odyssey. And it was on for 4 or 5 years, from 1977 to '82, when I was 7 years old. Now, this Odyssey had a lot of segments to it, a number of documentaries. One was we dove down to find this wreck Britannic that sunk in the Aegean Sea in 1916. She hit a German landmine and was in 400 feet of water. Actually, the Britannic was one of 2 other sister ships, made by the White Star Line. One was the Titanic, same size, and the other one, the Olympic, that took troops to Europe in World War I. So we wanted to film this, and we did. We made a segment on it. But this particular segment had a domino effect on people because a few years later, in 1985, Dr. Robert Ballard was so inspired by this that he went out to try to find the Titanic, and he did it in 12,600 feet of water off Newfoundland in the North Atlantic. Here he is using his submersible called the Element to find it and do research on it. It split into 2, lost 2,000 souls in 1912. And he was able to find then also the Bismarck in 1989, a German Nazi battleship that sunk in a tremendous sea battle off Brest, France, about 200 miles west of where I was stationed in 1940. And this sunk and is in 15,000 feet of water. That's 3 miles down. He was able to find us. Imagine what the PSIs are on that. Both these ships broke into two sections when they sunk. This would actually then inspire, him finding this would inspire James Cameron, the film director, who inspired him to make the film Titanic. Actually, he would visit this in his submersible. And James Cameron, this is a fictionalized romance that he made about 23 years ago, but he was able to take this, his craft down to the bottom, the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, down at 35,000 feet. He holds the record for diving the deepest in a submersible. 35, that's 7 miles down. Imagine what the PSIs are on that. So when you're dealing with diving very far down, and even in submersibles, you have to be very careful, because if you have pure oxygen or don't mix it with the right amount of helium, you're going to get nitrogen narcosis, and it makes you have poor judgment, makes you drowsy, sleepy, and you don't want to be like that underwater. So you have to have the right amount of mixture of air in your tanks. And you remember when you used to swim in a swimming pool and then be at the bottom of it and then push yourself up and jump to the top underneath water? Well, you can't do that in diving, because you can't come up super fast from deep depths. You have to slow down. If you go up too fast, you get decompression sickness, or what's called the bends. Too much nitrogen in your system, the gases aren't equalized, so you have to go up slower. Even in those submersibles like the Alvin or Cameron had, it takes hours to get back up. Everything has to be adjusted in your body. So you have to be careful in what you're doing with this. Nowadays, they use the Triton 36,000 to go underwater, kind of like, almost like a Disney ride. Huh? Okay, here we are filming Hammerhead Sharks. Now, during the 1980s, I did TV specials on the St. Lawrence Seaway that separates Canada from New York, and the Nile River, the Mississippi River, and the Amazon River. And I produced film documentaries at this time concerning glacial societal problems like population overgrowth, oceanic water pollution, endangered habitats, and troubling environmental trends. For instance, in the 1980s, I produced 8 documentaries about the Amazon. Now, in the Amazon, which is the size of, basically the size of the United States, it has hundreds of indigenous tribes there. Each have their own customs and languages there, and this is being exploited during that time. A way of life and wonder was being taken away and exploited, and the whole system was under stress. The Amazon basin is so big that it contributes 20% of all oxygen to the world. It's our world lungs, actually. But right now, what's going on is it's being cut down, and in my time it's being cut down too. When I was first doing this, I noticed a lot of logging problems where the forests are being cut down, areas that were once forests turning into soybean fields and cornfields, slash and burn areas where they would get rid of the vegetation to be able to then graze cattle on it. Whole areas being taken off. In today's world, 1/3 of the Amazon has been destroyed. Has been bulldozed down. Imagine, since it's the size of the United States, 15 states being bulldozed down. How would you like it if your state that you came from was bulldozed down to make room for soybean fields? Wouldn't feel very good, did it? Now the water, air has become global garbage cans, and I noticed this when I was doing these series in the 70s and 80s. At that time, and you probably remember this, it was all labeled under the guise of pollution. Well, like air pollution, especially from plants and cars, water pollution from chemicals put in to lakes and ponds, rivers and streams, from companies that did this the wrong way, and even litter, and even oil spills. But nowadays, these concerns have morphed into very specific global problems, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which contains over 100,000 tons of material all stuck between the United States and Japan. And it concerns the rising level of the sea level rising because the Earth is warming up because we put 40 gigatons or 1 billion tons is a gigaton, 40 of them every year for decades into our air, which warms things up, puts the carbon dioxide into the water, the ocean water absorbs it, and makes the ocean water acidic. So these are the specific problems that we are having that we caused. Many people come to this club here, as well as other clubs, and deny this, saying, oh no, it's this, this, and this is what's causing these problems, and it's us. I'll be direct with you because I like you guys so much. We are raping our planet. Anyways, get off the soapbox. In 1986 to 1990, when I was 80 years old, I produced a series called Rediscover the World. Here my team and I were involved with 20 films that depicted unseen habitats. Oh, we went to Haiti and made a film called Waters of Sorrows, Cuba, Waters of Destiny, went to Cape Horn, South Africa, Waters of the Wind, went to Australia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Cape Horn, as I said, Tahiti, and we went to the Channel Islands and filmed there, the Great Barrier Reef, which is 1,400 miles long, and is at the top of just north of Queensland, Australia, the very northwest part of northeast part of it, and is the largest single organism in the world. It contains 3,000 coral reefs, 900 islands, and it was intact when I was filming it. Now we've lost about a half of it. The Bahamas, Phuket, Thailand was a playland for rich Chinese people, Chinese millionaires, and the Bering Sea and Tahiti. So we went to these places to film for this series called Rediscover the World. We ran into giant fish. We run into that thing. And crocodiles and sea turtles. Now, I like the sea turtle a lot, and I can identify with them. I'm not slow like a sea turtle, but I carried my home with me, the Calypso. I carried it wherever I was and wherever I went, so I can identify with it. We also filmed marine iguanas under the Galapagos. There's giant land tortoises that live to be 100 years old, elephant seals, emperor penguins, marlins. They travel over 22 miles per hour underneath the water, fastest ocean animals. Coral reefs. We filmed giant manatees. They're not manatees, they're... Oh, thank you. Manta rays. Manta rays, thank you. And gropers. And we went to the Galapagos Island, filmed there. How about this dreamy location? And these are called blue holes. They're really sinkholes in the ocean, and they have a little bit different tint to them. Now, we went to, too far on that. By this time, I was an ambassador for our oceans, an environmental activist, an advocate for the peaceful and meek, and a voice for exploited species and ecosystems. I stood up for the small people and the small species. From 1990 to 1996, when I was 80 plus years old, I relaunched Rediscover the World and filmed long, well-known rivers like the Danube and the Mekong River. Now, people don't know much about the Mekong River. It runs 2,500 miles. It runs south from Thailand, goes into Cambodia, Laos, and ends up in the Mekong Delta. And Tasmania, other places, Sumatra and Indonesia. And I wanted to go into the Danube River. The Danube River is about 1,300 miles long, and if you go on a tour of it, which you can with any tour company, usually you get in Germany, Vienna, Budapest, and you stop about here. But people don't know, because the Danube goes much further south and east, and travels through Serbia, Bulgaria, and ends up in a huge delta here. It's hundreds of square miles big, and it's just beautiful there. There's even a town out there built on stilts like Venice out there. So this is about exploring the world, letting you know what's out there, than from the tourist traps that some people get involved with. In this film series, we also filmed great white sharks, dolphins. How would you like to come this close to a dolphin? It's wild. And we also filmed right whales, sperm whales that dive a half-mile underneath the ocean to get squid, and whale sharks, really that eat plankton. You can come up right next to it, and they have filter feeders right there. They don't have teeth. And we also had films about the tragedy of the red salmon. These salmon, there's a tragedy because these salmon that live around Washington, Oregon area, they have to return to the stream which they were spawned in. But they can't get there because the dams are in the way. So they had to build fish ladders to get them up, but still this has cut down on the population. Talking about manatees, squid, Titicaca, blue whales. Talking about, we talked about lobsters, crabs, sea urchins that glow in the night, tuna, bluefin tuna, swim very, very fast, octopus. And if you put an octopus maybe on this table here, it will turn the color of the table. Wherever you put it, even on a checkerboard area, it will have a checkerboard pattern when you put it on the area. That's what's interesting. And giant...
In the paper, they said, or on the net, that the octopus is now using the garbage in the ocean to lay its eggs. So the garbage in the ocean, the octopuses are so versatile that that's what they're using to hide their eggs in the oceans now. But I just read that. I forgot to even tell you.
These octopus can be trained to do tasks, by the way. And here's a, thank you, giant jellyfish and an eel, moray eel. The beluga whale we made a series on, especially that these huge teeth, like piranhas, penguins, swordfish that make sardines, etc., go into huge balls that they can gobble up. We filmed through shark cages, where we filmed sharks. Known as the scuba man, I was able to tell people about my ideas to my crew. And we went to Easter Island. Did things on hippopotamus and on jellyfish. For all the above things that we're talking about, from the 60s to the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, I was responsible for more than 150 documentary films concerning sea life, marine conditions, and general knowledge about indigenous species and peoples from all over the world. For all the above-mentioned TV series, I received 40 Emmy nominations, like in sound editing, film editing, and cinematography and documentary programming. 40 nominations, and I received plenty of Emmys, and for all this, in 1987, I was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, which is a big honor for me. And I had quite a number of awards. I received many other international filmmaking awards in my lifetime. I won at Cannes in 46 and 56, the Venice Film Festival in 50, the Bambi Awards in 70 and 92, Cable Ace nomination in the 80s and 90s, Society of Camera Operators. I had 3 Oscars, 2 of these, and plus awards from other film organizations. I also wrote books. I said I was an author. I wrote The Shark in 1970, 3 Adventures, Galapagos, Titicaca, and the Blue Holes in 73. In 75, I wrote Dolphins. In 85, I wrote The Ocean World of Jacques Cousteau. And this book was done posthumously, The Human, the Orchid, and Octopus, Exploring and Conserving Our Natural World. So I was an author and spent more time later on in my life writing. And I was not a scientist or marine biologist. I had no formal schooling in these matters. I was like an educator, filmmaker, and environmentalist. I believe I inspired others who would join my causes or start their own. 1985, I had dinner with Fidel Castro. He was so impressed with me, he liberated 80 prisoners. That's a task. I told him to shave off his beard, but he didn't like that. Okay, so the Cousteau Society, I founded that in 1973, which is a membership-supported environmental fund. It provides information and inspiration to a worldwide public. Society is intended to love and protect the water systems for our planet and future generations. Now, what happened to the Calypso? A barge hit her in 1996 in the Singapore port, and she sunk. It was raised up, patched and dried, and then got new membership, and the hull was gutted. Got new ownership, not membership, and the hull was gutted. I won numerous awards in my lifetime, including This right here, the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, given to me at age 75 by Ronald Reagan. Numerous other awards here. They include the Grand Cross of the National Order of Merit, in 85, Honorary Companion of the Order of Australia, National Geographic Centennial Award in 1988, and I got membership into France's prestigious academy a bit later. Here I am making an acceptance speech for them. I was honored all over. And even people spoof me. This is a film called The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And people spoof me because I guess I was kind of they make fun of people that they love. So you can get this at the library. It's a funny movie. My oldest son, Jean-Michel, died with me at age 7, and he became executive vice president of the Cousteau Society for 20 years. He went out making his own films, wrote a book, My Father the Captain, My Life with Jacques Cousteau, by him, and he made a film version of this. He's made over 70 environmental films you can catch on cable today. Here we are together. And here we are here. He's even done one on the BP oil spill, and he's made quite a bit of contribution to environmental science. My younger son, Philippe, here I am with him numerous times. Here he is. Well, he first learned to dive with me at age 4 in 1945, but when not in school, he spent his summers with me aboard the Calypso. He wanted to be an airplane pilot at an early age. He was the lead photographer on many missions that we have discussed, and he was involved quite frequently in the productions that we had. Only one thing is that he had an untimely death in 1979. At age 38, the plane he was piloting crashed in Lisbon, Portugal, and he was instantly killed, leaving behind a wife and my grandson, born 6 months later. So, I still miss my son. That's a big loss. And here he is right here. Was very much like me. Simone died of cancer in 1991 and received a full military funeral. Just after that, I announced that I had a secret family with Francine Triplett, who was 30 years my junior. We had 2 secret children from our affair. I had a daughter named Diane and a son named Pierre Yves. Here. And she became president of the Cousteau Society. We were married in 1991. Here we are together. And this is my children. Other children have grown up. I have at least a dozen grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There are a couple places named after me. The Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Reserve in Tuckerton, New Jersey, which is on the east coast by the Atlantic Ocean. It's where the Molucca River runs into the Atlantic, and there's an estuary there, a big marshland, and they have a research center there. Thousands of fish and birds call this their home, a protected sanctuary. And this is where they study striped bass and finfish at the Tuckerton, New Jersey place, Life on the Edge. A great place. Also, in Mexico, off the Guadalupe Island, which Mexico owns off Baja, there's a marine sanctuary there, a protected area, has a statue of me underwater, and a great coral reef. We need, there's a couple dozen of these sanctuaries located throughout the world. They're small. We need thousands of them, not just hundreds of them, not just a couple dozen here. This is how to protect our waters. I died on June 25th, 1997 at 87 years old in Paris, suddenly of a heart attack. I was laid to rest in a family vault in the same French town I grew up in. Here's the vault, my name, and then was buried in the town of André-Cusac. Many different memorials for me, underwater, and plaques all over with me. Many praise me as a kind, generous soul. He has spent his life educating and encouraging millions of people to better understand and protect our world and to nurture it further. This is how I'd like to be remembered. And people do protect what they love, and I love the oceans, and thank you. That is the end of what I'm speaking about. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I also